Were you actually watching during the embalming process?
Absolutely. It's definitely an art. It's a science. There's also a very soulful level to it, the level of care. The first question we get asked a lot of times is there going to be a live stream of the funeral? Cameras that you can set up at the cemetery so that your loved one is always involved in your day or your birthday party. Having QR codes, they can scan QR codes and see pictures and videos and see people tell their own stories in their own words.
Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Nikki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact.
And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. And I wanted to warm welcome our guest, Joél. So, Joél, the reason I reached out to you, you are the grave woman, and you have a really strong presence, online presence with your grief content and material. And I just wanted to welcome you to the show, and then please share with the audience how you got here.
Absolutely. So my name is Joél. As you mentioned, I'm known all over the world as the Grave Woman. I am a licensed funeral director, embalmer, and founder of the Multicultural Death and Grief Care Academy. How did I get here? I I consider it a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've been curious about death, about dying, and caring for those in transition and after they die since I was a little girl. I had an uncle that was a funeral director, and I spent a lot of my time with him at the funeral home.
So as a child, you were like just comfortable being around. Were you actually watching during the embalming process?
Absolutely, yes.
Oh my gosh, how old are you?
Oh gosh. My earliest memories of going to the funeral home, I was probably 7 or 8 years old. But before that, my mom, my grandmother, and the elder women in my family and community belonged to what was called the Missionary Society through our church. And so a lot of times what their work involved would be almost in alignment with what we refer to as doulas today. They would be caring for people that were passing away. They would be just there in the rooms with people that were transitioning, bathing them, taking care of them, singing to them. And
Oh, I
so
just got the chills.
death and dying have always been a part of my life. No, I was not afraid at all. It was something, there was like an internal gravitational pull towards it for me. And so when I was old enough, I figured out, when I say old enough, probably 25, 26 years old, was like, hey, this is actually what I want to do. So, yeah.
It's definitely a calling. I mean, most of the people that I've spoken to, it's an unexplainable reason why we're comfortable in this space. So, I mean, even think about it, a 7-year-old being in a room, not just with a dead body, but then watching the process of an embalming and maybe share with people. Can I use the word gruesome? I mean, it's kind of a gruesome process. So maybe for those people that are not aware of it, I use the word gruesome. How would you describe it especially as a 7-year-old?
Artistic.
Artistic.
I would use the word artistic, definitely. It's definitely an art. It's a science. It's a technical skill. But there's also a very soulful level to it, the level of care, the level of attention to detail, the level of almost not an attempt to recreate what God has created, but an attempt to restore it to a way that brings peace and aesthetic comfort to those that will be viewing the deceased after this sacred art is done. And so I definitely, legally, when you look up the word embalming, there's like, consensual mutilation in order to preserve, disinfect, and restore, right? But I, again, look at it as more of a spiritual / artistic practice.
In ways of preserving the image of the person that lived a full life or lived the life that they lived. Some of them not so full, right? I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with children and people whose lives were cut shorter than expected.
Absolutely. Just last week, I went to the funeral home to help with an embalming, and there was a stillborn that could not have been more than 30 weeks
Oh,
gestational, and there's always this question as of who would this person have become. But then the gentleman that we were embalming was well into his 80s and was a famous blues guitarist and had lived this amazing life. And so you have both the sad ending of the beginning and the fulfilled ending of life, so to speak.
you know, being able to document it, being able to document whether the people, you know, whether the life is lived for days or weeks or for decades, and to be able
Right.
to do that. How have you seen the transformation of this? You know,
Mhm.
your tagline is the future of death and grief care in a multicultural. What's changed in the last 10 years, 10, 20 years that you've seen?
Absolutely. My tagline is culture is the medicine for grief. But speaking to the tagline about the future of death is multicultural, um, I've seen so much change just in the last 5 years with COVID. You know, we were 20 years behind the rest of the world as it related to using digital platforms to handle business, like signing contracts or sending photos back and forth. People were literally bringing photos and documents and coming into the funeral home to sign things that could have been signed via DocuSign 20 years ago, right? And so that is one aspect. The fact that people really don't travel for funerals, especially post COVID anymore. The first question we get asked a lot of times is there going to be a live stream of the funeral? How do I access the streaming? And so I've seen literally hundreds of streaming services specific to death and funeral care pop up in the last few years. I've been approached about some weird things, and I say weird from my standpoint. It may be meaningful to someone else, but basically cameras that you can set up at the cemetery so that your loved one is always involved in your day or your birthday party, or you can take them with
Oh,
you.
wait a minute, you mean
Uh,
like having a 24/7 video cam on the grave?
yes, yes,
That's a
absolutely. Or
service that's
QR.
being provided?
Yes,
Wow.
that is a service that is being provided. Having QR codes on grave sites or markers so that when people are visiting cemeteries, they can scan the QR codes and see pictures and videos and see people tell their own stories in their own words. People's acceptance of things like online memorial books. I don't think I'm alone when I say that I remember going to the funeral home and writing my name in the memory book. That's a big deal. That's part of the reason you go to the funeral
You
home.
might.
People don't necessarily do that anymore. There's digital assets that allow us to capture memories and capture condolences that people don't even have to leave the comfort of their couch to contribute anymore. And so yeah, there's been so many changes. And I really think one of the biggest changes is people's perception about how grief is expressed. And so, what I mean by that is think about social media. There's a whole grief talk, there's a whole death talk where people are getting online and sharing their stories about death, grief, and the impact that those experiences are having on them. And it's connecting us in ways that before we may have felt isolated.
I mean, what's amazing, I'm finding just again since COVID, where people are from diagnosis to death, where people are, you know, documenting their journey. And, you know, I can't tell how many times I've gone on TikTok and watched a video that said, if you're watching this, I'm dead video, because they had done this pre-mortem message. And then after they've passed, they've released it, or their family has released it. And do you find that that helps or hinders in the grieving process, this digital asset?
I really don't think that's a question that is fair for me to answer because the journey with grief is so personal, right? So, what I may deem helpful or appropriate or necessary or inappropriate to someone in living that experience using that tool may find it very helpful. In my opinion and my personal experience, again, I am a very community-based, tribal-based person. And so sharing stories for me is helpful, and receiving, whether it be validation or just support or just having someone say, I disagree and I've experienced it differently, it is helpful because it helps me see things from multiple perspectives and vantage points. Some people may say it's unhealthy, to be so vulnerable with complete strangers, but who's to say?
Who is to say? You bring up a good point regarding that cultural difference, right? And that's what you specialize in, is the multicultural aspect of death and dying. My family is Jewish, so we deal with grief a very interesting way. As far as we go through sitting shiva, and we spend a year, and we light candles, and we really memorialize. We don't believe in life after death in the Jewish tradition. But I do find that some of the African American cultures, that talking about grief, and it does happen within the Jewish culture too, is that if we talk about it, then you're kind of like superstitiously jinxing yourself. Do you feel that that's something that you're experiencing and trying to break through?
In my culture, Gullah Geechee culture, there are some people that believe that you should not talk about death before it happens, right? But then there's others. A big part of our culture is belief in ancestors and veneration, and that we believe in life after death, and that the spirits or essence of those that have passed away help us navigate life, right? And so, in a sense, it's almost contradictory when I speak to people from my culture who don't want to talk about it for whatever reason. In working with professionals, I always try to help people understand that we have to meet people where they are. It's not our job to make them understand us. It's our job to understand them so that we can best serve them. And how can we serve those that we're trying to serve without understanding their belief systems? And so when I encounter that, I don't necessarily try to work through that with a person. I don't see that as my job or function. But what I do try to do is understand where they are and offer them support at that level, if that makes sense.
And I also just want to correct myself. In the Jewish tradition, we don't believe in heaven and hell. We do believe in that there is an afterlife of some sort, and it's the Kabbalah is, and I'm not going to quote it right now, but they do have that we do go to another place, another existence, because we're talking about consciousness. But it is a strong belief. But at the same time, even with our religious and cultural support, dogma, there's still this huge fear around death and the dying process. Do you find that also with your clients and people, your community you support?
Absolutely. And a lot of times, Nikki, to be honest, it does not stop with the fear of death. A lot of people are afraid that their families won't be able to survive or function without them. And in one respect, that's very selfless, right? I'm not worried about my death. I'm worried about how my wife will be after I die. But on the other hand, it is selfish at the same time, because it's like, are you living in such a way that is preparing people for your absence, whether that be financially, whether that be mentally, emotionally, whatever? And again, I don't think it's my job to convert someone's mindset, but I always try to ask those questions like, well, what can we do to best position them for your transition? Or what is your legacy look like, in the sense that what's living beyond you, and not necessarily on a tangible or financial level, but those intangible things, the things about your essence. How can we leave as much of that with your loved ones as possible?
So what made you start your online classes, your courses on grief? Talk more about those.
Absolutely. And just a correction, most of the classes that I teach, I do have a few about grief, but most of them are about teaching people about cultural nuance, whether it be technical skills or conversational skills, or just having hard conversations that help us look at ourselves in order to better serve those that we aim to serve. But the thing that made me start the academy was that in mortuary school, I realized that there was a huge gap. There were no conversations about taking care of people that looked like me. We learned how to take care of Jewish people, Christian people, and a little bit about um, Orthodox Mormons or Mormons.
So it's more
And
very much about a
so,
white, and I would think, I mean, even
absolutely, a
just
very
technically, I would think that how you would, even just from an embalming standpoint or a preparation standpoint, how you would treat a Caucasian person and how you would treat a person of color would be very different.
not necessarily technically or anatomically, but definitely as it relates to the impact of
Mm-hmm.
chemicals on textured hair, colored skin, melanated skin. And so I realized that there was a huge gap. And then when I started doing my apprenticeship and actually working under the tutelage of seasoned professionals, it was almost like, well, this is a Black person, so you handle this family, or you handle this case, or you take the lead on this. And I, for a long time, felt as if that was very much so rooted in racism. Then I started thinking and having experiences. One that I share very often is the story of walking in on my preceptor cutting off the box braids of a Black woman when the family requested that her braids be taken out. He was cutting them out from her scalp, not realizing that in doing this, he was cutting off all of her hair. And so I immediately stopped him. He expressed remorse, but honestly, he had no idea what he was doing because he'd never been taught. He'd never been shown right or wrong. And so having to teach him in that moment was also a humbling experience for me because it made me realize maybe this isn't rooted in racism. This is rooted truly in ignorance and lack of education. And so I met my wonderful mentor, Miss Anita Grant, who pointed out to me that all of the things that I had been talking about on YouTube and on social media could be continuing education courses for professionals that needed this knowledge, and I could take it to a deeper level and provide technical and theoretical trainings. And so I did just that and offered a few courses online in 2020. They took off, and the academy was birthed through that. And so now we have over 30 something courses on our website. And yeah, we talk about everything from internal implicit bias, racism and death care, caring for communities of color, caring for hair, caring for cosmetics, and grief and navigating that journey.
You also talk about essential oils, which is, please do. That is more of like, my personal, like getting into the complementary therapies. When I worked for hospice so many years ago, I was in charge of their complementary therapy programs where we did non-pharmacological means for enhancing quality of life. And we had an aromatherapy program, both for wound care, which was fascinating. And then also for, because we also offered, healing touch massage therapy and so forth, we use some of the different blends. So how did you, and how, I'm curious, how are you using essential oils post-mortem?
Absolutely. And so I'm going to answer that question a little bit of a weird way. I've always been attracted to essential oils and sensitive to smells. And when you do your research, you'll find that ancient Egyptians used essential oils in their embalming practices, and they are the creators, as far as we are aware, of the embalming practices that are still used modern day. And so there's always been a connection between the ancient Egyptians and the way that I use essential oils. When I was in mortuary school, I struggled very heavily with anxiety. I don't know why. I don't know where it came from, but I would have anxiety attacks. And I found that taking baths in essential oils helped me. And from a spiritual level, it almost as if it formed a barrier between me and the stress that I was experiencing in mortuary school. And so it became a layer of protection for me, and it still is. But recently, I was on TikTok and I saw a video about someone talking about being a miraphor, and I had never heard that word
what was
before.
A miraphor?
A miraphor. And essentially what a miraphor or morophor is a sacred oil bearer. And they were talking about Mary Magdalene and how she and other miraphors that traveled with Jesus anointed him in the tomb after his death as preparation for his burial. It was fascinating because it's like, this is almost in alignment with what the ancient Egyptians did, except for this was done externally on the outside of his body. And the way that the Egyptians used the oils during embalming was done intrinsically through the vascular system, right? And so I started doing some research, and a light bulb went off in my head that these oils, the essence, and I'm looking over here because I have like tons of essential oils over here. The essence of these oils don't only impact us in life, they can help us in transition. Like myrrh, for example, the way that it's harvested and the way that it could be used is to hold the emotional weight of grief. And so I started having some conversations with some of my death doula friends about, do you use essential oils at bedside? You know, do you ever anoint people and things like that? And it took me back to those times of my mother and the elderly women in my life who served on that missionary society, and us being in church and us being anointed with essential oils and holy water in church. And it's like, oh my gosh, these are not just isolated incidents. These oils have a trail that can be used from life to death. And they are in many cultures. There are certain practices and rituals that are done to babies, that are done when someone is going out on a quest or journey into adulthood or manhood or whatever, teenagehood. There's rituals that have been performed and that are performed within various cultures. Like when you go to a Catholic mass and they walk through with the smoke, that has essential oil in it. And so it's like, oh my gosh, these oils can be used and are used in our work. And I've been doing it unconsciously my whole life. And so, yeah, that was a long way of, that was the long way around of answering
I
your
appreciate
question.
the share, right? Because, you know, I try not to get too woo-woo on these conversations. It's hard because
I am the woo-woo.
you got the woo. I mean, you know, I describe myself as a closet woo-woo. Only because, you know, and this is the way I describe it when I'm talking to people, is that when the fact that we're talking about death, right? There's a veil, right, between the material and spiritual world, right? And again, we go back to whatever your beliefs are. So, what, you know, how you talk to an atheist versus someone who's agnostic versus someone who's a fundamentalist. I mean, you can go through the whole spectrum. But the bottom line is that, you know, when you reach that doorway of the physical body being gone, there's going to be some sort of transition, right?
Absolutely.
And what does that transition mean? And you know, to start getting into the I don't know, you know, I don't know what happens on the other side. And just to go down the rabbit hole a little bit regarding the technology, because this is where, you know, artificial intelligence, AI, we're talking about frequency, right? So so we're talking so oils have a frequency. There's a smell. The smell, I mean, scientifically, you know, from a physics standpoint, smell has a frequency, sound has a frequency, sight has a frequency, right? So when I'm talking to someone who claims to be a medium, right? So a medium is somebody who can talk to somebody on the other side. For me, that's just another aspect of brain functionality.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, right?
Absolutely.
So how is that? They're just reading the way a musician would read notes on a music score, or an artist would see an image on a blank canvas. A medium is just able to pick up the frequency from another dimension, another realm.
Absolutely. And I think we all, honestly, and you can call it woo-woo, you can call it spiritual technology, spiritual awareness, whatever you want, right? But I think to a certain extent, we all have the ability to tap into unique frequencies. And you talked about like AI, right? I wholeheartedly believe that AI, as we understand it or as we use it, is a portal to a higher frequency. 100%. It's a frequency that we don't understand. We don't know where this information's coming from. We don't know how it's coming so fast. It is a light language. And so as we're utilizing it as individuals, whether we realize it or not, we're integrating with that frequency. And so that veil that you talked about, the veil of I don't know, the veil of transition, it is becoming thinner and thinner. I also, and I want to apologize in advance if I butcher these concepts, but I also think neurodivergency is an integration of that frequency divide, or that portal divide. There's just so many things. And that is the part that excites me about the integration of technology, death, and grief care. I do think that there need to be some ethical considerations because, like I said earlier, we have to meet people where we are or where they are and not try to jerk them up to our level of understanding or our
Proselytize them,
level of.
make them believe what we believe.
Right.
No, you're just meeting them to support them in whatever transition or death experience they're going to go through.
Right. And so with that comes the ethical consideration of how much do I expose a person to in such a vulnerable and emotional state, such as grief. I'll give you the perfect example. A couple years ago during COVID, when there was a lot of death, a lot of collective grieving, there was a company that approached me about a product that essentially would be FaceTime. It's not FaceTime. It's not associated with Apple or anything. I'm just putting it into context that people would be able to understand. They wanted to give me a lot of money to promote a product that would essentially be like a FaceTime for speaking with your loved one who had passed on. And when I say they wanted to
The
give me a
person's
lot of
already
money, it was
on.
like the person's already gone and they're using the clips like from social media, voice recordings, text messages, and things like that to create digital images and videos where you could enter prompts, like much like ChatGPT, to get that image or that video or that voice to communicate back and forth with you. And when I say a lot of money, I mean more money than I probably have ever been offered to do anything in my life and probably ever will be, to be honest. But the reason I could not accept it was because what about that mom who just lost her 3-year-old child in a car accident or to cancer, and who is in a place in her mind where that veil that you spoke of is so thin that she does not know the difference between reality and what is happening technologically. This application has no soul. It has no
Guardrails. Right.
conscience, has no human essence. And so essentially, you're trapping this person in a loop of
Grief.
uncontrolled, unmonitored, undistinguishable grief, and you're isolating her because at the price point they were offering it, who else other than wealthy people could afford to have access to this? There's been no clinical studies or research or any background done on this because it is 100% new. And so now she's alone in this world in her grief with this thing that she may or may not be able to separate from.
Have you ever seen the television show Black Mirror?
Absolutely.
Right. It's bad. Right. Do you think that that's where we're with the technology?
Horrifyingly so. Horrifyingly so. Yes. And if we're thinking of the same episode, I'm thinking of the episode where the woman puts this thing she gets in the mail in the bathtub. I did a YouTube video about that years ago when I saw that episode. But yes,
and her
I
husband
do.
comes to life. Right.
Yes. But do you remember when he was standing on the cliff and he was telling her, well, if you want me to jump, all you have to do is tell me. And she wanted to get rid of this thing so much, but she couldn't harm
her right, the image of her husband.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things, and that's why I say maybe there needs to be like some type of AI ethical committee that specifically focuses on the potential impacts and whatever could happen with people that are grieving. Even like those there's these apps where you can make your loved one or make a picture. It doesn't even have to be someone who's passed away, move or smile or hug you and things like that. While that is beautiful in one sense, is that healthy? Or like, I don't know. What are the repercussions mentally or emotionally for things like that?
Because what we, in the grieving process, and we want people to be able to move on, right? I mean, so in Devo, we build out a final playbook, right? So the idea is like, let's plan for your end of life now while things are good, legal, financial, physical, digital, so that when you go through the grieving process, you're not bogged down by all the administrative pieces. So that's the aspect of my final playbook. but at the same time, to be grieving and not being able to move forward in life and do some of these apps, technology, are they keeping people prisoner in the grieving process? Like that, it doesn't allow them to exit the grieving process. I question that. That's the ethical issue that we need to like explore.
Absolutely. And I mean, I could speak from knowing someone personally who lost a dear loved one over 12 years ago, and they use their social media almost as a shrine to them. And I believe it has caused a deepened level of depression, a deepened level of almost being stuck at the physical age where they lost that loved one emotionally, psychologically, as far as emotional intelligence and capacity is concerned. And so I often question, even though I believe social media should be an outlet for expression, whatever that expression is, creative, emotional, whatever. When this person makes these posts, they get so many likes, they get so many comments.
It
they
feeds
get
into
so
their
feeds into the dopamine receptors that I feel so bad, but this is feeling good that I'm getting this
negative, right?
attention. And so now it has totally convoluted the pool of what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And the only time, from my observation, that they feel good is when they're getting attention for expressing this grief.
Interesting. So they've kind of built their new identity around the loss of their loved ones.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Oh my gosh, this is just an amazing conversation. So can you and just talk to our audience as far as about the platform, how people can engage with you, and how they can get more content from you.
Absolutely. You can Google The Grave Woman. I will pop up everywhere. My website is thegravewoman.com. My social media on all platforms is at The Grave Woman. And if you want to just hear my voice ramble on and on and on, I have a podcast where I interview amazing guests. And I'd love to have you on, Nikki. It's called the Death and Grief Talk podcast. It's available wherever podcasts are, specifically Spotify and Apple. And I have a YouTube channel. Just type in The Grave Woman on YouTube. And yeah, I'm here. My email is thegravewoman@gmail.com. So I'm The Grave Woman
Easy
everywhere.
to find. And with that, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. Easy to find. And with that, we'll end here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.